Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist slash secular slash awesome community. This is episode 238. I recorded this interview on August 12th, 2021. Okay, so I didn't actually record this. Chris Watson did, but now that I'm co-hosting the Postmodern Polymath podcast, I first started this, I considered myself a guest host, but now it seems permanent as Chris and I have done 3 shows. So am I abandoning this post? Well, I'm trying to get back into the swing of actually having guests, and that's been a struggle. At first I thought I wouldn't cross-post the episodes, but you know what? I enjoyed this interview, and I thought as many people as possible should listen. So check out our talk with Candace Gorham. She is a licensed professional medical health counselor. Let's listen in as she talks about being an ordained minister who has become an atheist slash humanist activist researcher. Her first book is the Ebony Exodus Project, and in that book she talked with black women who left the church. Her newest book that we mainly talk about in this episode is On Death, Dying, and Disbelief. It'll be coming out in early October, so please order it on Amazon wherever you get your books. Let's start the conversation.
Took your note about the whole higher power thing, and I reached out to God, and he got right back to me. Turns out he's the Old Testament God. He smote my enemy, and he punished the innocent.
Welcome to episode 136 of the Postmodern Polymath podcast. I still can't get it right after all this time. How y'all doing? With me, as usual, is my friend Zach, who has frozen, apparently, and his internet's fucked up again. So, this week we have somebody really special on. Well, I think it's special. I actually met her at American Atheist Convention, which is in Cincy. Was it last year? No, it had to be 2 years ago. And she's really cool, and I've known her through Candaces, of course, Black Nonbelievers. And she has a new book out. Let me go ahead and read this long thing she made me read. No, I'm just kidding. Hold on a second. She's a licensed professional mental health counselor. She's a former ordained minister turned atheist humanist activist, researcher, and writer on issues related to race, religion, and mental health. She's a member of the Black Humanist Alliance Advisory Board, the Secular Therapist Project, and the Clergy Project. She is also the author of the Ebony Exodus Project, Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion and Others Should Too. And I almost got that without fucking the entire thing up. And of course, her new book, which is coming out, which we'll talk about. Like I said, Zach's disappeared off the face of the planet. Nope, there he is. We'll bring him back. All right, Zach is back.
Glorious timing, as usual.
Yes. So, allow me to introduce Candace Gorham. How's it going, Candace?
Hello, how are you doing?
All right.
I'm over here cracking up about Zach being frozen.
Oh, it's such high-tech internet around here.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, Candace, how you doing?
I'm doing good, doing really well, real good. How are you?
I'm okay right now.
Is it appropriate for me to ask the host how he's doing?
I don't know.
Always,
You
always
asked the wrong-
appropriate.
This ain't a real show, so I don't really know.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yes, I'm doing. Zach is obviously having technical problems.
Oh, it's glorious. It's just wonderful.
And we accidentally matched. Don't think this shit was on purpose. He has a yellow Black Nonbeliever shirt, and I have a black one. Like I said, pre-show, I just grabbed it off the top pile of the dirty clothes. I have all the T-shirts on the couch, and I just smell them and just whatever I want, I don't go anywhere. What am I doing? I don't go anywhere. I go to the liquor store and get gas and food. That's all I did.
I planned this look. I clearly planned it.
Clearly.
So
Y'all left me out. I'm so upset. I'm really
we should coordinate a little better.
Coordinate.
There we go. You already know.
Uh-oh, we do have comments already. Looks like Daryl Ray is. Oh wow, that's
I know.
Oh, Daryl Ray.
We
Hey,
better
Daryl.
be serious. We got a serious guy, and then chat. Well, Chris was nice enough to let me lead off. So, Candace, this is kind of a question I like to ask people leading off. Is like, can you talk about like your own like religious background since you actually were a minister, and like kind of how you got out?
Yeah, so I was that crazy child that was that like took religion seriously, like from the very, very beginning. I was actually raised a Jehovah's Witness. Um and so when my parents split up, they split up when I was about like 9 or 10 years old. And when they split up, my mom was not the slightest bit interested in religion, or I mean, well, not religion. She wasn't the slightest bit interested in like the Jehovah's Witnesses. But in my over the top seriousness about religion, decided at 9, 10 years old, I wanted to continue to study with the Jehovah's Witnesses anyway. And so my brother and sister and all my friends, everybody would laugh at me and think I was so crazy because here I am choosing to, continue to do Bible studies and go to church, or go to the Kingdom Hall at 9 and 10 years old when I didn't have to. No, there were no adults making me do it. I was just choosing to do it. And I got to middle school, same sort of thing. I continued to go to church. I started going with my aunt and going to the family church, which was the United Methodist at that time. And I, again, not going with my mom or my dad, I just wanted to go. And I got confirmed in the Methodist church, and I was on the choir, and, I did all that stuff. And I went, 3-4 nights a week with my aunt, and, even my cousins were like, why in the world do you go to church so much? But I was so serious, but like, I was that serious about my faith, even as a child. And so what ended up happening was, my sister ended up marrying a minister who was of the charismatic holiness Pentecostal blah 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 blah. He was non-denominational, but he was of that side of things. Prosperity gospel, everything is a demon, cast out devils, pay all your money to the church, fast 10 days, speak in tongues, yes, all of that. And so I of course, that's my sister's church. So I started going to my sister's church. And by age 20, he had convinced me that I was a evangelist and I was a prophetess and I could speak a word from God, and I got visions and I could testify and I could do all those things. And so at 20, 21, 22, I was, prophesying and speaking in tongues and, interpreting dreams. And I was doing all of that, at 20, 21, 22 years old. And it was just one of those really extreme type churches. So I did that for a few years, and then that my sister and her husband, brother-in-law, moved away to another state, and I ended up transferring to another church that was a prosperity gospel type church. And that gave me the opportunity to sort of step back from being involved in ministry directly. I was still like part of the praise and worship team and stuff like that, but I wasn't a minister. I wasn't like ordained in that particular church. And so things started going wrong in my life. Like, I was having all kind of personal life drama, and that made me say, something must be wrong. I must be doing something wrong. Like maybe I'm I'm missing God somehow, some way. I don't know. I'm doing something wrong. So I decided I need to study harder. I need to read the Bible more. Maybe I've been reading the wrong stuff. Maybe I need to open my mind up to more ways of interpreting things. And so I started reading more, studying more, considering new ways of, thinking about religion and God and that sort of thing, and slowly studied my way out of religion, basically. And I like to emphasize to people, like, I didn't become an atheist because I was mad at God or anything like that. It was pure and simple. I studied my way right on out of religion. I just did my own research and decided it didn't make sense anymore. So that's a real quick overview, nutshell of the from birth to now.
Well, do you use any of like the skills you had, when you were interpreting dreams, when you were having visions, in like what you do now for a living, or is that like a skill that you've kind of let skill? I don't even know how to explain it since I've never been through that, but I was just wondering, do you still kind of conjure up any of that?
Yeah, you know what? I think that what makes me a good counselor is what made me a good prophetess and a good evangelist and a good minister, that I have good emotional intelligence. I know how to read people. I know how to listen to people, sit and listen to people and listen to their concerns. I know how to read body language. Like a lot of the stuff that we think of, and I'm not too, I think now I reflect on it differently, and I say, maybe part of what I thought I was doing when I was so-called prophesying was using some of those skills, and didn't realize that that's what I was doing. I thought it was God, and really what I was doing was using some of those, people skills and that emotional intelligence, some of those emotional intelligence skills that make me a good counselor and a good therapist. I think that's what it really is. I mean, not to kind of brag on myself, but I think I got some good people skills when I need to.
Bragging if it's true.
Yeah.
You
should. And I think of like, people like on the Clergy Project who were ministers, and then they have to figure out if they leave the faith, like what to do. And it's good that you like found skills that you already had that could, work in the quote unquote real world. But I've already hogged a couple questions. So Chris, it's all you.
No, I think Zach pretty much covered all the important stuff. It's like I said. Well, I mean, as far as that goes, I mean, I know you've authored another book, Ebony Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember. I did buy it. What was that book about?
That one consisted of 10 interviews of Black women. And it was just basically them telling their stories about their experiences with religion and how and why they ended up leaving the church. Or most of them, I think pretty much all of them, had been religious or spiritual to some degree. Maybe one or two of them were not very religious at all, but all of them had some foundation, some religious and spiritual foundation. So all the stories were pretty much about their deconversion or their process from sort of leaving behind all that spiritual stuff and their experiences with religion. So there were like those 10 stories, and then interspersed within those stories was the research that I did. So the reason that the subtitle is, why some Black women are walking out on religion and others should too, that others should too subtitle has to do with that research, those research chapters where I was talking about basically ways that the Black church is letting Black women down. Supposedly the Black church makes all these promises about things that it's going to do or that it provides for for people. And if you look at sort of the outcomes for Black women, the standard of life, the quality of life is actually not that great when we're looking at things like our physical health and our mental health and our, financial stability and that sort of thing. And so that's what those chapters looked at. It dug into the research behind, our quality of life and what that's like. So that's why that, and others should too, part of the subtitle comes in of like, these are the reasons that the church is, here's the evidence as to, that maybe the church isn't providing everything for us that they say they do.
Well, isn't misogyny pretty much baked into the whole thing? I mean, misogyny is like one of the, it's already there. I mean, I don't know. I don't see how you can say with a straight face how religion somehow is going to take care of women when in the Bible they just treat them like property and shit.
Literally property.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of.
But misogyny is a big part of like religion, but at the same time, it seems like women are always the like backbone of the church community. So they're always like, without them, I feel like they wouldn't continue. So it's wild that kind of happens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when they vote, we depend on their vote too. By the way, the backbone of the black women elected Biden. I mean, they were the biggest percentage that put them over the top, pretty much.
And I flipped Georgia. I hope it leads to good things, but at the time it was like, Stacey Abrams and a lot of people you never heard of. It did a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, black women put in some work in America, but we put in the work in the wrong places sometimes, such as the black church, and maybe we need to rechannel our efforts in some other places.
True, and it would be nice if people recognize more of y'all's input and y'all's accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of fucked up, but that's a whole different story. So Candace, of course, the main reason we had you on, other than you being an awesome person in general, is your new book that's come out. Well, it hasn't technically come out. I guess September 1st is the release date. On death, dying, and disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you wouldn't mind kind of giving a brief synopsis of what kind of led you to write this book, and what it's about, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So, on death, dying, and disbelief it is a tribute project, basically. In 2019, my high school sweetheart died from he had been in a car accident, and he was more than just a high school sweetheart to me. We reconnected we reconnected later in later years in life, and so he was significantly more than just past high school sweetheart. And so when he died, it's by far probably one of the most difficult things that I've ever dealt with. And so around the 1 year anniversary of his death, the grief just basically came back and hit me in a way that I was just not expecting it to. And I thought, at the same time, there were a couple of other women that I knew that were going through the same thing. They had recently lost some really significant people to them. And so dealing with my own grief and sort of trying to help them deal with their grief and being aware of what they were going through, I just, started sort of reflecting on, what they were both atheists and non-believers. And so I was reflecting on the fact that there's no resources for us. If we're looking for something to help us manage our grief, there's really no resources for us. And we talk a lot, there's a shortage of, therapists out there for non-believers. And so in addition to just that shortage, there's this shortage of resources as well, materials to support us. And so I thought, I'm a therapist, I'm a writer, what do I know about grief and managing grief, and how can I put those thoughts in a book? What kind of tips? And I can also use this as a tool to sort of process my own grief as well. And so that's what I did. I looked at it as a tool to process my own grief, which the book is part journal, it's part memoir, so to speak. I don't know if that's too big of a word. It's part my personal journal dealing with my grief, and part, like self-help book. So the book consists of 10 tips that people in mourning, that people are grieving, can take and can do to help them process and manage their own grief. And the point of the project, the whole thing holding it together, was that it was like I said, it was basically like my memorial to my high school sweetheart.
Okay, sorry. Apparently nobody can hear me very well. So Zach, if you wanted to
speak into the microphone, Mr. Chris. Well, one thing, having read the book, I think it definitely gives you tips for grieving, because I've been to a couple of funerals in the past few years, and it felt like it was a sales pitch for God. And it seemed like the priest, like doing the ceremony, didn't know the person very well, so they just said, "Ooh, God." And that's not something that obviously will connect with us. But you took it like another step further. Like, obviously this is a book that is needed, but you made it very personal. And then, so why did you decide, like when you were writing it, that you were going to put like asterisks on sentences that actually made you cry while you were writing it?
I think that, so as I was writing the book, obviously it was very emotional to, like I said, it's part journal. And so it was very emotional. And there would be times that literally I'm sitting there at the keyboard with tears streaming down my face, dropping onto the keyboard. And so when that would happen, I just would put an asterisk right there at that sentence that I was typing. And I just decided that I wanted to mark that pain. I don't know. I think that when I was grieving, when there were other people some of those other people that I talked to, it was just very comforting to have somebody with you who knew exactly what you were going through, and to be able to connect with them on a very visceral level. Like, I'm crying right here, right now, and you're crying right here, right now with me. We're crying right here, right now together. And so I felt like there was something about marking that in that book, was keeping it real for me. It was a tribute to my loved one, but I felt like maybe, hopefully, even the reader, if you got somebody in mourning, maybe even the reader might read that, see those, those marks there, and feel a connection there as well, to help them, with their own mourning and their own grief.
Okay, what are some of your, just in general, what are some of your favorite tips, your personally favorite tips that you think help people out the most?
So my absolute favorite, and anybody who knows me probably should already be able to guess that my favorite tip is going to be spending time in nature, spending time outside. I hike. I literally have tattooed on my leg the word hiker girl, and which I talk about in the book, Hiker Girl, and how that came about, and why I call myself, why that's tattooed on me. But I hike a lot. I try to get out. I try to hike, if I can hike every Sunday, that's my goal. I just came back from a 2-week trip in Colorado, hiking 14,000 foot mountains, hiking the deserts of Utah, and just all that. And I talk in the book about the research behind why spending time in nature is so good for us and why it's so good for our bodies. Actually, it's not just, I mean, it is good for us, our mental and emotional health to be out there in the world, but it's, it reminds us of the circle of life. And, there's all this beautiful stuff that goes with, spending time in nature. But then there's also, just the real, science behind, like, how it's impacting your body. Obviously things like, moving your body and exercising and, getting your blood flowing and that sort of stuff. Those things are also are also beneficial to your mental and emotional health. Getting a chance to sort of turn your mind off and just, sort of let it get back to its natural state, which, getting away from all of the electronics and the tech and all the stuff that distracts us and keeps us there's something about nature that I talk in the book about the science behind, or the research that shows, like, people, heal faster when they, are exposed to nature, or they see, images of trees and stuff like that. There's research that talks about, just how being in nature and being exposed to nature and seeing things of the natural world are just really good for us. And so that's my favorite tip, is get outside, do something in the sunshine, go look at some stars, smell the fresh air, listen to some birds. That's by far my favorite one.
Well, in the book, you talk about, like, the 5 stages of grief, and I feel like everybody's heard of them. And I think there's this understanding or misunderstanding people have that, like, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, like, you go through them in this, like, specific order. Like, there are 2 parts of it. Like, can you talk about, like, how people don't go through these stages in order, and how you can't give yourself, like, hey, I need to be through this stage in a week or 2, like, how there is no real timeline when it comes to dealing with grief?
So that, like you said, one of the biggest misunderstandings that we have in our society is that you go through these stages of grief and you work your way through them, and the end goal is acceptance, and you get to acceptance and now you're healed. And the researchers who developed the stages of grief, the concepts of the stages of grief, absolutely did not intend that was the way, that it works. And, anybody in mourning who's ever actually paused and paid attention to their emotions can tell you that that's not the way it works. It does not flow in an orderly manner. And I think that it's important that people understand that it doesn't flow in an orderly manner, because if you're expecting that you're supposed to grieve in some orderly fashion and you're not, you might find yourself getting more frustrated and more angry or more depressed or more something, that your grief doesn't seem to be progressing in some orderly fashion, and I'm not making progress towards acceptance. But that's not how it works. You don't start out angry and then I get to depression and then I get to acceptance. And you may experience all 5, you might go through all 5 of those stages in a matter of an hour. I remember, and it's kind of funny. It's funny, but it's not funny. When you're in the middle of it, it ain't funny. But then when you're out of it, you can kind of laugh about it. But I remember one day, I can remember many times where, I would start out feeling really sad and really depressed about something, thinking about my loved one, and being just so depressed and so down and so hurt. And then immediately I think I remember something, or I become angry at him because I'm like, I told you to wear your seatbelt. I'm sitting here and I'm so hurt and I'm so depressed and I'm so sad about it. And then immediately I'm thinking, but I told him to wear his seatbelt. It makes me so angry that he didn't wear his seatbelt. And then, 5 minutes later, I'm, sitting there going, but you know what? He didn't. And it's okay. I just got to accept it. And, and then the next minute I'm back to being, oh my God, I cannot believe it. I just can't believe he's not here. Now I'm in denial again, and you just can't, like, in minutes, you can be cycling through all of those stages and you can feel all over the place. But it's because those stages, you can flip in and out of them like light switches, unfortunately. And it's just not orderly, and it's not pretty, and it's not fun, and it's very distressing, and it's exhausting, but it's just not how, it's just not an orderly process.
So let me kind of ask you. You were talking about hiking, right, and sort of the help you get from that, right? But also, I wanted to ask about kind of if you needed like antidepressants and stuff like that, because I feel like sometimes we get these messages from people who do not understand mental health very well, that just go outside and and I'm not not downplaying that at all, but I'm saying some people are on the side, will just go out and just you'll be fine, just get some fresh air, But anybody who's gone through mental illness understands that it's a lot of chemical imbalance also plays a role, as well as maybe something like that, and it can help, right? But myself, I'm lots of other people who have listened to this have been through mental health issues, right? Depression and anxiety. And they understand that a lot of times they saved my life. I don't know if they helped me out when I was in my young 20s. It was pretty bad, right? So can you talk about a little bit how that can help people out through this process?
Yeah, actually, I have a whole tip that says, attend to your mental health, and, go see your psychiatrist, take your medication, and not be afraid don't be afraid if you've never had a mental health diagnosis before, if you've never been diagnosed with depression or anxiety or PTSD or, whatever, if you've never had a mental health diagnosis before and you're grieving, you might still benefit from some kind of mental health medication, even if you don't meet, even if you've never had a diagnosis before, because like you said, your chemicals get off balance. Grief throws your whole body out of balance. It's going to throw all your chemicals and your neurochemicals and your hormones, and it's going to throw all of that out of balance. And so you might actually benefit from an antidepressant or a mood stabilizer or an anti-anxiety or something during that time frame that you're, deeply grieving. I have talked openly about this for years, and I even talk about it in my first book, Ebony Exodus, that I have a mental health diagnosis. I've taken medication for years. My daughter is 17, so I've probably taken medication for 16 years. I swear by my meds. I will fight you over my meds. Do not come for my pills. We're gonna have a battle. And so I'm very much pro medication for sure. And I think that people, need to give it a real consideration, especially if they're in mourning, because like you said, going outside, can be beneficial, or spending time in nature. All those things are going to be helpful. But, at the end of the day, if your body does not have enough norepinephrine in it, it doesn't have enough norepinephrine. It needs it, and rolling around in a pile of leaves is not going to give your body more norepinephrine, you know. So you do need to, or if you know, have panic attacks, you know, you might need something to respond to that panic attack, you know. Now, you know, you may not have enough time to go outside and sit under a tree and take some deep breaths and wait for it to pass. You might need something now because you're sitting at your desk at work, you know. So you have to consider all those situations as well.
Apologies, while you were going through, Comrade Coconut, the mascot of the show, decides to rub all over.
Wow.
Well, that's the thing. Like, when a cat needs something, a cat needs something.
I would like to point out that cats' purrs have been shown to be calming to humans.
Yes. Yes. I am. Love
their assholes, not so much.
Which they love to put in your face.
Right in your face, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's... And the only reason I asked that was because Robin Williams, the anniversary of his death was fairly recently, and mental illness, he battled with that his entire life, and there's still a stigma attached to mental, like if you commit suicide somehow and of course this is different, you know, this is a little, but I'm just saying people don't understand mental health, and there's still the stigma attached, like you know, like I just said, you know, go out in nature is great, you know, but sometimes you need medical attention or whatever you want to call it. So that's the reason I asked that question.
Yeah, one of the things when I work with kids in my clinical practice, when I work with children, one of the, you know, you have a lot of parents who don't want to put their children on medication. And one of my favorite things to say to parents, especially when you have a kid who, like, say, for example, an ADHD child who is truly ADHD and would truly benefit from medication. And now I don't throw the ADHD diagnosis around lightly because it is so overused. But when you see real ADHD, it blows your mind. And so I've had some situations where I've had parents who their child really was ADHD and they did not want to, they use medication. And one of my favorite things to say to parents in those situations is, sure, pills don't teach skills. But pills make it more possible to learn those skills. You know, so no, the pill is not going to teach Johnny to stay in his seat, but if you want to give Johnny a fair chance to actually learn how to stay in his seat and do his work and he might benefit, you know, giving him a little bit of ADHD medication might give him the little boost that he needs. And so that's how I feel about medication in general. Yes, the medication is not going to make you happy. It's not going to take away the depression, you know, it's not going to take away the grief. It's not going to, you know, change your whole outlook on life. But it gives you the relief that you need to be able to then work on yourself and your situation in a more it gives you the relief that you need to be able to actually work on it without having to battle against your body and your brain.
Well, one thing I really liked about the book is this, not necessarily, I mean, it is a guide for people who are grieving, but it is also a guide for people who know people who are grieving. Mm-hmm. So how do people help their friends when they're grieving? How are they able to kind of like emotionally connect with someone who's really struggling? Because you want to help them, but it's very tough to like figure out like how you're helping someone who's going through something and they're not going to be able to just fix it with a snap of a finger.
Yeah, so my final tip in the book is specifically geared towards people who are just, they're not grieving themselves, but they want to support somebody who is in mourning. And I give a long list of ideas of different things that you can different things that you can do, but then also things to keep in mind. You know, keep in mind things like, it's easy to forget stuff like like touch. You need consent for touch. Make sure you're getting consent for touch, because you don't know if the person that you're touching really wants it. Like, there are things like that are just really, sort of some really basic stuff. I talk about really practical things like, offer to babysit for the person, or even better yet, offer to clean up the person's house. If it's somebody that you're really close with, go clean up their house for them. For me, cook for somebody. That's a big one, right? It's the cook. But then something that people often don't think about is they cook too much, and then you end up with a whole bunch of dirty dishes that you left in the person's house. So think about that. Or, so I just give some really practical tips and things for those who are supporting others to think about. I could run down a list if you want to run down a list, but the main thing I think is that I try to keep it throughout the book. I tried to make sure that all of the steps, all of the tips were things that a person could do today, right now. I could pick up this book, I could, open to page, 75, point my finger, and there's something that I can do today to either help myself or to help somebody else. And so I wanted to, make it extremely practical, even for me, the griever, and for, you, the person supporting me as the griever.
Okay, so one of the things that was interesting, I thought, was crying, right? So one of the things you discuss is like you're a really big emotional, like, grieving person, right? And I'm not like that personally, so I guess I don't quite understand that as well. But can you tell me kind of the healing power, I guess, of crying and that getting out of your system, and how it might help people who are like me, that aren't of course, they're, toxic masculinity, patriarchy, blah, 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 whatever. But it might help somebody just get it all out, right? And not to be embarrassed about doing it.
Mm-hmm. So again, one of the things that I tried to make sure I did throughout the book was to weave in, actual research. So there's Candace talking about her personal experience, and then there's references to, some real research that some, clinician or some clinical person or some doctor or some scientist or somebody somewhere did. And so one of the things that I talk about in the I have a tip on, I think it says something like cry, then cry some more, or something like that. And in that chapter, I talk about, there's some research that talks about the ways in which crying can be healing. Can help. And it talks about things like how, our tears, we secrete, stress hormones when we out of the tears, or that there's some research that says, I thought this was real interesting, there's research that says like sobbing, lowers like the temperature in your lowers like your body temperature, or like your sort of like your temperature around in your head. The sobbing, the fast intake of the air is cooling, when it goes in. And so there's something about that cooling sensation that has that has a benefit to the body. Or it talks about just the different chemicals that the body secretes on the, this, like I said, there's stress hormones that come out of the tears, but then there's also, it talks about releasing endogenous opioids into the body, and so we increase our pain tolerance when we cry. And so there's a lot of really interesting research out there that talks about the actual physiological benefits of crying. and the ways in which, there's, that it's not just about me as a therapist saying, hey, you need to cry. So, that I keep clients coming in the door, and then I think that just as a clinician, myself, I do think that, if you think about, you know, it can be, I don't know. I think for me personally, it just is, it's like it's taxing on the body. It's almost like a hard workout. After a hard workout, you're exhausted, you busted and disgusted. You may not feel so great immediately after the workout, right? And that's what the crying is like. You may not feel so great immediately after the crying, but you have now sort of worked your body out, and then your body goes into like a rest mode. A lot of times when you cry real hard, you go to sleep. People go to sleep. Well, if you're mourning and you maybe aren't sleeping so great, guess what? A real good cry and then falling asleep after crying, that might be just what you need, some good sleep. And so that actual taxing process on the body, I think actually can be a good thing at times as well. To me, I don't know. It is not. I by no means try to glorify grief crying, because grief crying is absolutely horrible. It's ugly. I kind of give like a really graphic description of what my grief, what it was like for me at sometimes. It's horrible. I don't try to make it seem like it's a fun thing at all. Just something to just take lightly. But I do think that it has its benefits.
And we're not going to have, you do the entire book, because people need to get the book. So we're going to have to leave them hanging just a little bit. I wanted to transition over, like, one thing during COVID that we've been missing is like this in-person situation. And in the next couple of months, you'll be going to the Women of Color Beyond Belief conference. What was it like going to the first one, and are you really looking forward to the next one that's happening in a couple months?
Oh my God, the first one.
Actually, it's in a month and a half. It's really soon.
Yes, the first one. Yeah, the first one was so amazing. I think that to go there and to see all these women of color, to see nothing but women of color, talking and presenting, that was great for one thing. Just to see all women of color presenters was a beautiful thing. But to have all of these, there were some men there, which was, great. We would be nice to see more men, but it was mostly women of color, that were there. And it was so exciting just to see so many women who would say, I've never been to an atheist event. There was this one lady, I don't know how old, that lady was that lady was at least 80 years old. She told us her age. I can't remember, but I feel like she told us her age. I forgot how old she said she was, but she was at least 80. She was at least 80. And she was an old Black lady, and she had real tears. We all had tears, but she was crying, and she was saying she had been an atheist her whole life, and she had never, to her knowledge, ever met another Black female atheist. And so coming to that event and seeing all those Black female atheists just got to her to a point that she broke down, like, in the hallway crying. And so all of us are like standing around her, hugging her and crying with her and stuff. And we're like, oh my God. It was just so amazing. And yes, I am very much looking forward to this, going back again the next, and if Mandisa, if you've ever been to a Mandisa Thomas event, if you've ever been to any of her conferences, any of her parties, her birthday events, she knows how to throw an event and put it together. And it's so just the fact that it was organized by Mandisa Thomas already tells you that it's going to be good. So there's that. But then, it being what it is, that it's by women of color, for women of color, geared towards women of color. I can't even express my excitement. And like I said, the last time it was a really cathartic, healing, all of that. It's just encouraging process or event.
Well, one of the best, I guess it was an eye-opening event. I went to a Black Nonbelievers meeting in Atlanta, because I was interviewing Mandisa at the time. And that was the only time I've been to an atheist event where I was the only white person in the room. And you know what? I was just there to sit there and listen. And that was a good experience because I think, I've had her on a couple of times and she's gotten like some pushback about like, well, why do you need a Black Nonbelievers group? It's like, well, sometimes you need these subgroups to get together where people can just say, hey, there's another person like me out there and we can connect in a way other people can't. So I thought it's great that she's able to do this on like a conference level, because usually it's like, yeah, she shows up and she does a talk, but then we go back to our mostly white guys talking and,
because that 80-year-old Black lady has heard of me. I'm sure she's heard of atheist events before, or she's known that there's atheist organizations out there. She's old enough to have heard of Madeline what's her name, O'Hare, Madeline Murray O'Hare. She surely in 80 years she's heard of somebody, but she's never made any attempts to go to any other atheist organization or event. This was her first time coming across Black women, and that was what made her feel comfortable enough to come out. So, I mean, it's like, that's when spaces for Black people, Black non-believers is important, because it reaches people that have never been reached before.
Yeah, I want to get my soapbox a little bit here because I get so fucking irritated. I was in a local group, National Atheist group, fuck 'em, and some white guy, because I was trying to promote Mandisa, the Black Nonbelievers, group or whatever. Oh, why do we need a separate? We're all atheists here. We're all atheists here. Why do we need a separate group for, the Black folk? He didn't say I am obviously being a little sarcastic because he was a dick. But, I mean, this whole myopic idea of, and this, of course, just spreads out, and it's just Black people in general. Why do Black people need their own thing, as if the, 400 years of oppression and separatism, and, it's fine, it's totally fine, let's forget about it. We're in a post-racial world because we had a Black president. Anyway.
Of course.
Sorry,
of course.
But, we're wearing the shirts, but I really do. And actually, I've told the story on my own timeline. But I was at a gas station here, and I so mad I didn't get her name. She came up to me, and I had this shirt on, and it was a Black woman, and she came up to me and asked about this shirt because she actually was listening to. She's listening to like the Dillahunty show, which I can never remember off the top of my head. Atheist Experience. And she was asking me about it. I just thought it was wild that this is the first time this has ever happened. And I just thought, she's actually, Mandisa, and of course you and Black women in general, or atheist women, are reaching out to them, and they're there. There's an audience. There are people who are not being served because they are afraid to, right? And so when some cracker motherfucker comes up to me talking about, why do we need these separate groups? It's because motherfuckers like you don't even see them. You don't know that they exist. So yes, we do need separate groups to identify this sort of thing. Because y'all sure as fuck ain't. You just made a point of, telling me why do we need a separate group anyway. Okay.
It's true.
And every time there's talk of like the Black Nonbelievers group or women of color beyond belief, it's always like everybody's invited. There's no like, this is an exclusive group. It's like anyone can go to this. So please do. But, you might want to go and like shut your lip a little bit and just listen, because, it's something that needs to be done. And I think that's something your book does very well. It's like sometimes you just need to listen to people and see what they need, and maybe you can help them. Maybe just you being there when they tell their story is all that is needed at the time. Because we've all grieved about a person or something, or in our case, we're a little too attached to our cats, but that's not a bad thing. And it's something that connects us all, and we want to have this connective tissue, but we want to have this ability to, like, people need their space and they need their groups and they need different things, and it's totally fine.
So I'm glad you, for myself, I don't see many books. I don't know if I've seen, I'm sure there are somewhere, but the fact that you put out a book dealing with grief specifically from a non-believer, and you actually use was it non-theist?
Non-theist.
Yes. From a non-theist point of view, is actually very helpful to people who have previously not had this kind of audience, this kind of advice from somebody who's like, well, what the fuck am I don't believe in God. I don't have a higher power, so I don't have this kind of comfort, I guess, from above or whatever. Where can I find this comfort for myself without that, right? And that's I think that's one of the underlying themes in this. To me, in this book, is that there is a way for you to deal with this sort of thing, even as a non-theist, right? I'm sure that was one of your, obviously, it's one of your, the main point is for you to understand. It sounds like you were trying to do self-therapy while also helping other people. And I think that's fucking awesome. Personally.
Yeah. I think that, like Zachrilege, like Zach was saying, at the outset of the show, grief is often relegated to sort of the realm of the spiritual, right? People, or death and grief, right? People, when you die, funerals are automatically assumed that it's going to be spiritual, even if the minister doesn't know the person who died. Just sprinkle some kind of spiritual language in there, say something nice, and talk about heaven and angels, and boom, you got the instant mix for a nice, pleasant funeral, and it's just assumed that's what you're gonna talk about, spiritual stuff, the afterlife, and that sort of thing. And so, like you said, we, as people who don't believe in any kind of spiritual entities or supernatural entities or afterlife, we don't have anything like that. We don't have anybody or any materials or anything to turn to, and living in a society where grief is grief is the realm of the spiritual. We often feel, like when I go to conferences and stuff like that, I get a lot of questions. I fielded a lot of questions over the years about grief and about, how should, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And is it okay if I do this? And, just people just have, you'd be surprised at the kinds of questions that people have had about, non-believers have had about grief and about managing grief and managing, death. And it's just because they feel a little bit of confusion, because I'm a non-believer and I don't believe in any of this spiritual stuff. So what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to deal with my family? I'm confused. It's like suddenly being a non-believer just makes the whole grieving process extremely confusing for us. And I think that, it needs to be, one of the things that I try to do in the book is normalize that confusion, but because it's a function of being in a society where grief is just part of the spiritual. It's just automatically assumed that you're going to be spiritual when you're talking about grief, and since we're not, and it's understandable that we're going to be a little bit confused about it, and that's normal. And so maybe we need some resources to kind of help us navigate that.
I do want to say it's especially galling when you live in the South, okay? Because Christian Jesus, God help me, Jesus is everywhere in the fucking South. If you have any idea, churches on every corner, and I went to a funeral, and literally they thought Jesus was sitting there waiting as soon as they died, right? Literally, like Jesus was going to just be sitting there, hey, what's up?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it's so ingrained in everything in the culture in the South. And I don't think a lot of people in other parts of the country maybe understand how deeply this is it's cloying like the humidity in the summer. It's everywhere. And I especially appreciate that because you understand I know you understand what that's like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that helps.
My sister and her kids just recently moved back from California, and my niece, she's an adult, she's 21, and she commented to me how she was so surprised that there were so many graveyards. And they lived in the Antelope Valley area, so they were in LA County, but they were in the valley, and she was just like, we didn't hardly have any graveyards, where I live. And I was like, well, I guess, there was a lot of cremation or something going on out there. Like, people in the South don't believe in cremation because, you need your body for the resurrection. Like, exactly. I was like, that right there tells you, that tells you something about death and the spirit, the connection between death and spiritual beliefs in the South, that you got to have your body. There's no cremation going on in the South. Apparently there's plenty. I'm assuming there's plenty of cremation going on in her area because she was not used to seeing graveyards. And so she got here and she was like, why are there so many cemeteries around here? And I was like, what you mean? Like, that's where y'all put y'all dead bodies.
Death cult. It's a death cult.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, Christianity's fucking death cult. If I'm being honest, other people might disagree. I think it's a fucking death cult, but what do I know? Mm-hmm. Zach, did you have anything you wanted to?
Well, this is probably not connected to the book, but do you have like a dream hike that you want to do? Is there? I mean, you said you went to Colorado, so 14,000 feet seems pretty high. But is there somewhere like if you could just go, you would do it?
I don't think that I have a dream hike. I want to do as many 14ers in Colorado as I possibly can. I want to I don't know if I want to do all of them. I don't know if I'm young enough to get them all in before I die. I guess I could if I tried, but it's some pretty dangerous ones out there, so I don't know if I'm gonna get them all in. My goal is to just try to get as many of them done as I can. So I don't necessarily have a dream hike. I just want to do as many 14ers in Colorado as I can. I think it's like, depending on how you count them, I think it's like 40 something odd 14ers. So yeah, if I can maybe get to like 40, I'll be happy. Maybe.
Well, I think Mr. Ray will encourage you in all these hikes because he seems to be present. And every time I see you post...
Yeah, ask him how many 14ers there are. He'll tell us. He knows.
I'm sure he does, yeah. I'm always encouraged when I'm like, Jesus, I got to hike again.
Isn't Daryl Ray, is it Kansas City or Kansas? I mean, what's the highest peak? I mean, actually, oddly, like I lived in Kansas City in high school, and it's weirdly hilly. Like, yeah.
We had a whole...
The eastern part of Kansas. The University of Kansas campus is very hilly, but most of Kansas, very flat. So if you're going to hike, you're hiking sideways. You're not going up.
Yeah.
But Colorado's not too far from there.
No.
It's just a couple of states away. It's right there.
Yeah.
53, he says. So there you go. 53. You can do it a year and a week. No biggie.
Oh, my God.
53 Sundays.
You got this.
Exactly. We'll cheer you when you're done. We'll give you a golf clap. Good work.
Well, thanks for coming on, Candace. I won't hold you any longer, but I appreciate you coming on. And I think are we the first show that you've come on to promote your book? Is that correct?
Oh, I'm so sorry you're not my first, but I didn't. But that doesn't make you any less wonderful to have a wonderful experience just because you weren't my first.
All right, we'll take it.
No. I've done another one, but yeah.
Good. Well, good. Because somebody actually might watch that one. But anyway, but the podcast version we've heard some audio issues, which I shall correct in the podcast version, which will go out not too long. And of course, I will share that with you and everybody else so you can disperse that among the masses. I'll even try to make Zach sound good, which is a difficult process. But
Thank you, sir.
But no, Candace, thanks for coming on. And
thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed talking to you. I really enjoyed the book, and I actually really appreciate what you've done. And I don't want to try to exaggerate it too much or whatever, but I do feel like you have given kind of a manual for people who are non-theists to be able to deal with grief. So.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you found it enlightening or beneficial.
Beneficial. That is definitely the word. And I'm going to recommend to as many people as I can find.
Oh, please do.
All right, Candace.
Yeah, thanks, Candace.
I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, totally. You guys are coming to any of the conferences or anything? You don't think you're going to make it to Women of Color?
That one, maybe. Who the fuck knows? I mean, I'm single. I ain't got shit.
Travel right now is,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to ask. There's probably going to be an online version just to check the speeches.
Probably.
Nothing else
would be great.
Nothing else. Yeah, that would be. And then I'm going to contribute regardless of whether I actually go or not. That's Mandisa knows I'm good for that. So I'm always down to support her cause or whatever. So. All right, well, everybody, Zach for sort of being here once again, tolerating me, and Candace for being here and tolerating us both. So until next time, y'all take it easy now, okay?
Why did you bring up the Holocaust?
The priest is the one who brought up a benevolent God. I thought that called for a rebuttal witness.
No, you called Jesus the mayor of Auschwitz.
Well, I don't want to worship some thin-skinned God who can't handle a little criticism. No, if he's all-powerful, why doesn't he grow himself a pair of balls?
Live read. I can't quit you, Hasan Piker. I've started listening to his podcast Fear and Malding, but it's not quite the same energy as the cut-ups of the live streams I get on YouTube. The good thing with Hasan is you can choose how to consume his content, whether it's his daily 8-hour streams on Twitch, the 20-minute edited versions on YouTube, or the hour-long podcast. Lately, he broke down Tucker Carlson's odd rant about how he screwed up in Afghanistan, then brought on Eric Prince, a literal American warlord. Yeah. If you want to support this show, be like Freethinker 215, Alan Marks, Hugh Man, Chris of the Postmodern Polymath podcast, Larry, Darryl, and the other Darryl. Go to patreon.com/Zachrilege. Follow me on Twitter, like my Zachrilege cast page on Facebook, and send all mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Hoping to get back on track with some guests coming up soon. David Fitzgerald just did another trilogy. This guy can't just write a single book, can he? It's just not possible, but that'll be coming up real soon. So until then, let's continue the conversation.